Hi, I'm Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Now, I know that everyone that's listening to this show and to me certainly understands that emotions matter. And those of you that have friends and colleagues and family, etc., that you also know pretty much get that emotions matter. But what most people don't seem to understand is that we can actually help create the emotions we want and the emotions we need actually to get done the goals that we want to somehow master and complete. So, how do you actually do that? How do you actually change emotion? How do you get the emotions you want and need for yourself and even for others that you can also actually change how others feel? Now, does that sound curious to you at least? Are you at least interested in the idea? So, what does it take to actually change emotion? What does it take to actually make emotions different than what you're experiencing? Can you even? I mean, some people, I'm sure, are listening and thinking, look, whatever it is you feel, you feel. That's just what it is. Deal with it. It is what it is. I'm sure you've all heard that at one point or another. But my conversation with you today is about the idea that emotions are changeable. It doesn't mean you shouldn't think about why you're feeling a certain way. If you understand the history of emotions in human beings, the idea of emotions is particularly an evolutionary system. At least that's what Darwin thought when he first talked about this years ago. He felt that it's part of our system to help keep us alive. You know, when we first were evolving, there were many saber-toothed tigers running around, I guess, and we had to learn how to run as fast as we could to get away from them. Or if we learned how to create weapons, how to fight with them. If we learned how to do that, then we could possibly survive in fighting against something that was a really major menace at the time. And we were possibly successful or not. If we weren't successful, we wouldn't have survived, of course. So emotions were there in primitive times to just really help us to deal with fear and help us to thrive in circumstances which were filled with all kinds of dangers out there. Now, we experience lots of dangers today too, but they're different. If we're in a meeting and we're very upset with somebody and the person's coming across as a real bully and just making us feel extremely uncomfortable and we want to fight back or run, often we can't. We're not in position to do that. And so somehow we have to put that aside somehow and manage it as best we can in circumstances which we don't really have an exit strategy for necessarily. So what do you do in today's world? How do we deal with our emotions? And I think it starts with we understand them. We really try to focus on this emotion I'm feeling. What is it telling me? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling confounded? Why am I feeling uncertain, doubtful? Why am I feeling upset, distracted, unfocused? Why am I feeling kind, generous, supportive? What is the prompt for these feelings inside me? And if I'm trying to influence others, I'm trying to learn what causes others to feel joy, to feel incentivized, to feel motivated. What causes others to be curious? And I don't mean others in general. I'm saying a specific other. If you have somebody in mind you're trying to influence, are you paying attention to how they react to situations that you both might be in together? If you happen to be around them a lot and you have conversations with them, are you paying attention to how they seem to feel based on what you're saying? Are there certain topics that seem to give them pleasure and other topics that seem to cause them to feel disgust perhaps, or upset, or at least displeasure of some kind? So I think that by focusing our attention on the emotions we feel and on the emotions others who are important to us feel, we can learn a lot about how to influence our own emotions and the emotions of others. Now, I want to share with you several strategies and then give you some examples of what I mean by that. But before I get to that, I want to just share that there is some interesting science. I encourage you, if you're interested in science and you're okay listening to a scientific conversation, not everybody is, but some people really enjoy science, then I'd encourage you to listen to a woman named Monica, Monica Guzman, Guzman. Put her name into any kind of search engine that you're using or artificial intelligence, and just type her name in, type Braver Angels, and type neuroscience beside it, neuroscience interview. I listened to an interview. It was quite long. It was an hour and 26 minutes. I don't usually listen to something that long. It's going to hold my interest. But it was about the science of the brain. And this neuroscientist that Monica was interviewing shared some really fascinating research. I often have stayed away from talking about how the brain influences how we feel, because I thought, well, it was always interesting to me as someone interested in science. I'm much more of a person who wants to deal in the concrete, specific, can this help me now? And often I found that the brain research, like knowing the amygdala is part of our primitive brain and it is the space where emotions take place, great. But what do I do about that? How does that knowledge help me? Well, it may not, unless you find some other way to use that knowledge in a way that is strategic, that helps you to then influence what you are feeling or what others might be feeling when you see an amygdala being hijacked. That was Dan Goleman's term for the idea that sometimes, I'm sure some of you, or maybe all of you, have had the experience where you felt like, I'm having this incredible out-of-body experience where I feel like I can't even believe this is me. I'm just acting so out of control at this moment in time that I can't believe this is actually occurring. Excuse me. So the thought is, how do you control that? How do you control when you feel like you're just about to leave your body and have this experience of being out of control and you start shouting or yelling at someone or something about something? And you realize it's not constructive, but it just feels like that's what you need to do right now. So when Dan said that happens to people, and it does on occasion, he calls it an amygdala hijack. That was his term for it. So we know it operates in the brain, but that doesn't tell us what to do about it, does it? I don't think it does. It gives us some information about where it's located. But here, in Monica's interview with this scientist, a neuroscientist from Germany who's doing some incredible work with Stanford University, he is mapping the ways our brain works. He talked about things like this. Some of you have heard this before. I mean, this is sort of grotesque to talk about, but it happens. People that have lost limbs, but prior to losing the limb, have found that their limb, maybe it was a leg or an arm, was extremely painful. And yet, when the arm is gone, amputated perhaps, or just removed somehow, the brain still registers as if it's there, and they call it phantom pain. Now, Freud looked at it a little differently, but what this neuroscientist said about it was that we have mappings in our brain that tell us that the signal from the arm to the brain in pain still exists. The mapping to our brain is still there, even though the limb is gone. That's fascinating all by itself, isn't it? Just to think about that. So what he tries to communicate to all of us, as I'm listening to him, is that we have reactions in our brain that are tied to our feelings of anything, really. But he's focused on things like depression and anxiety because there's so much of it out there, right? Some of you that are listening right now have gone through depression or have huge bouts with anxiety. And you wonder, what do you do with that? And I have some ways, and I'll talk about ways that I've thought about, rational, constructive, logical ways to deal with emotional challenges. And that's what the Emotion Roadmap's about. But I also want to share with you that there's some ideas that this man has that are pretty damn interesting. Now, I don't think you can always be happy. I don't think that makes sense. I think there's reasons to feel anger, for example. And he didn't talk about this, and I think that's a miss on his part. But there's reasons why we're angry because of an injustice. Anger helps fuel people's abilities to fight back against injustice. Sadness helps us deal with the loss of something important to us, whether it's a loved one or a job or a car that we loved or something. Sadness is a way that leads to grieving that is about dealing with loss. We also have the need to feel anxious where We need to remove ourselves from this situation. This looks like it might turn into some kind of physical combat. People seem to be getting very upset with one another in a room or a meeting or a bar or a restaurant, someplace where we're at, where all of a sudden we feel like this is unsafe. I'm getting anxious. We need to remove ourselves from here. So there are reasons why we feel unpleasant feelings at times that make sense. They're important. It isn't that there's any bad feelings. The idea of bad seems to have arisen with the idea that they lingered too long. We're anxious all the time. Or we're depressed. We can't seem to want to get out of bed in the morning. We don't recognize when something nice has happened that we want to get up and celebrate that niceness that's happened for somebody in our own lives or someone that we know and care about. Something special's happened and we want to celebrate that. That's missing. And so we miss that, and we miss out on feeling joy, ecstasy, even extreme happiness. But what he says is that we can reprogram ourselves by paying attention to he calls them 7 molecules. And they're molecules that influence oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. These are things that have to do with the pleasure principle, with feeling happiness, contentment, calmness, joy, so on and so forth. And he said that there's ways that we can influence our brains to experience more of that. We can cause our brains to have the ability to map out strategies for having our brain get us past the point of depression, get us past the point of being overly anxious. And I thought, wow, that's pretty sensational stuff. And that is somewhat practical. Now, I don't understand that science so that I can explain that to you in a way that I think is beneficial. But I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, to Google Monica Guzman, Guzman, and neuroscience, and her interview with a man named Alex from Germany who's doing some great work with Stanford about all these ideas he has about the role that physiological response has in helping us control our emotions. Another idea that's been out there for a long time is, and I imagine you've heard this, one of my friends runs an organization called 6 Seconds. And in that 6 seconds, take 6 breaths that you need when you have something upsetting that you can't act on right away, or you don't want to respond the way you initially feel like you need to respond because it's not appropriate for your circumstance for whatever reason. Now, I've heard take a deep breath, take several deep breaths, and to me that always meant take a time out. If you ever watched any sports, then you know that a lot of times a sports team that is struggling to execute their plays, their offense, their defense, somehow things are amiss and they seem out of focus. They'll call a timeout. Now, what do they do in a timeout? They talk to the players. They try to get everybody back focused. They talk about what's happening, what's wrong, and how to make it right. And they don't always get it right, but that's what a timeout's supposed to do. And I always thought about the idea of taking several breaths was a way of thinking and clearing your head so that you can focus more effectively and respond in an appropriate way as opposed to how you might initially feel like you need to respond. That would be a cause for some problems down the road, if not immediate. But what this man said was that when you take those breaths, it changes the level of oxytocin in your body. It raises it. So you feel less likely to be combative necessarily. I don't know that it makes you feel pleasurable about the circumstance, but less combative. Now, I think that's useful to know about. It doesn't really change things except to say taking a breath, not just one, but several, over a minute or two, allows you to take the time out. I still think that makes sense. It's like a team in sports taking time out to refocus and rethink, what are we doing out there? We just had too many mental lapses. Let's get back in the game. Let's be focused. Let's get our mind back where it needs to be. Focus on what it needs to do. And let's go out there and execute successfully. Okay, thanks, Coach. Thanks for taking the time to just remind us, okay, we made a couple mistakes, but the game isn't over. There's still time to win this game. Let's go out there and execute. Great. Good strategy, good idea. But the fact that we're taking deep breaths also gives us more oxytocin? I didn't know that. Now, supposedly that's true. And again, I haven't done the research, so I can't say that because one person said this on an interview I heard that's necessarily true. But if you're a scientist, you can check out the research if you like. But it's interesting, isn't it? So I wanted to talk today about why emotions matter in the sense that we can control them. We can do what I call emotion-based planning. That's what's missing for most people, that they don't really recognize there's a way to take control of the wheel. That's my metaphor here. Take the wheel and control how you feel by simply doing 3 strategies in my mind. One is, can you change the feeling? The feeling you have about something may not be that useful to you, but it may be, you should understand why you feel the way you do. And I'll talk about an example for me right now that I'm not proud of, but it actually it offered a learning opportunity for me. And I like to come on the show and talk about, all these things that help to make you more intelligent, emotionally intelligent, that is. I like giving you lots of ideas and examples. That doesn't mean that I get it right all the time, because I certainly don't. I will say, though, having learned about this emotion roadmap I created and use it frequently, I am better at many things in my life than I've ever been in the past because of what I understand now about emotions that I didn't know before. So I know that emotions are controllable. I didn't really recognize that before. I know that emotions are informative and that they're there to save us, to protect us, to help us to thrive. I sort of knew that, but I didn't really understand it quite that well. But what I never really got before was that if what I'm feeling isn't helpful, I can change how I'm feeling. And another part of the science of emotional intelligence that I was privileged to learn from Yale President Emeritus Peter Salovey and his colleague Jack Mayer and their colleague David Caruso, I was privileged to learn from them that there are certain emotions that are better for particular tasks, maybe even ideal for certain circumstances, challenges, or situations. So let me give you an example. If you've ever been in a meeting, you don't have to work for an organization to have been in meetings. You might be a club member, you might be in something to do with a religious organization you belong to, or something in the community, or some kind of team that you've been on in the past, where you're in a meeting, right? And you're in that meeting, and during that time that you're there, you're feeling as though you want to be a creative group. You want to brainstorm. You want to be able to share any and all ideas about how to make a new product, or help improve our financial situation, or help get more people interested in what we're doing, or make the presentation of what we do more exciting and appealing to potential customers. And so you're in this session where you're really, you don't have a real necessarily a focus meeting where you're kind of planning the details to execute a plan that's already in place. No, this is about just what could be, what would be possible. If anything was possible, what would we do? What could we say? How could we perform differently? And as you're in a meeting like that, how do you get people to feel open and willing to say anything that comes to mind? That's what you're encouraging. Real open creativity, where people are free to say anything they want. What's the best emotion for that? You may know, you may not know, but I'll tell you. The best emotion for that is openness, feeling open, and feeling safe. Now, I don't mean a safe space like I'm afraid I deal with conflict. I don't mean it that way. I mean safe in the sense that if I have an idea, crazy as it might sound, that's just it. It can be crazy sounding. And no one's going to say, that's crazy, we'd never do that. Because as soon as somebody says that, what do you think the rest of the group feels? Unsafe. This really can't be open. And it isn't anything goes. You just said anything goes, but you didn't say anything when that person said, wait a minute, that's crazy. We would never do that. Because if you let someone say something that someone else might think is crazy, the person sitting beside them or across the room who hears it might think, not sure if that would work, but it gives me an idea. And that's the idea of being creative and open in a brainstorming meeting is you want anyone to say anything that they think might make any sense at all. Hopefully it sparks something amongst another person that says something that's more concrete, realistic, and doable, but never would have been thought about without that other remark that at least a few people might have thought was crazy, but didn't say so. They didn't say it was crazy because you want to maintain that openness and that feeling of safety when you're in that room. That's the idea of having certain emotions are better for particular tasks than other emotions. Now, it's not always easy to figure that out, what's the right emotion for what you're trying to do. But don't you think it's worth thinking about? And so part of what I've done over the years I've learned these things is to help people by having you call in. So if you're struggling with something right now and you're dealing with a situation or a circumstance where emotionally maybe what you're feeling isn't as helpful as it could be, and you're really unclear, undecided, confused about what to do next, if you want to call in, you can speak with me. I offer this expertise I've gained over the years. I've been very lucky to work with some brilliant people over the years, and I've learned a lot of things that I found to be really helpful to others. And I'm very willing to share that. It gives me great pleasure to help people. And the concept behind my show is that if somebody calls in and shares something, and I'm able to help you using this guided roadmap, then other people are going to learn it too. And other people are going to be better at this as well. So partly, changing emotions starts with understanding that what you feel isn't necessarily helpful for what you're trying to get done. And if what you're feeling, at least as you're thinking about any circumstance or situation in your life right now, I'm certain that any of you that might be listening today got something in your life where you're not sure about what you're going to do about it. Now, maybe it's not a big deal and you don't really think it's necessary to call in and get some help. On the other hand, maybe it is something that is important to you. And you're thinking, would I call Chuck? Would I give Chuck a call and see if he can help me with this? I don't know if I want to call somebody and talk about this on the live stream on YouTube. I'm not sure that's something I really want to do. I get it. It's not easy to do that. But at the same time, you might get some help that you might not be able to get any other way. I'm pretty unique in this space in terms of how I help people deal with emotions that are not necessarily helpful and need to be at least modified or changed. And sometimes, by the way, one of the things that I suggest is that once in a while you can't change what you're feeling, but you can do some other things to at least put the feelings aside and try to encourage yourself to feel the feelings that are going to be helpful. And there are ways to do that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let me give you the number in case you got something. Now, by the way, this doesn't have to be something at work. It could be. It could be something with a colleague, somebody you're having some disagreements with, or someone that the chemistry isn't great between you and trying to figure that out. Or maybe you've got a manager or leader that you think could be better at what they do, but you're afraid to say something because you're worrying about, something that comes back and bites you somehow. And, there's reciprocal damage that happens when you share something that you think isn't great that somebody that you work for is doing. And then all of a sudden you're a target for them for whatever reason. And it's scary to think about, how do I say something to the person I work for? On the other hand, there are ways to say things. There are ways to get things over to someone in a way that feels supportive, that suggests that they might do something differently, and doesn't really feel like it's being critical or judgmental. You're just saying, maybe there's a different way to do this that might get you what you want quicker than maybe what you're doing. Would you be interested in hearing that? And then maybe you can say something that actually is helpful to them and they're appreciative. I mean, it's possible to think about how you get something said that might feel confrontative and yet at the same time is going to be helpful, and do it in a way that the person feels supported, not attacked, not insulted, not made fun of, not judged, but recognizes that you're actually trying to do something that's going to make them feel better and be more successful at getting what they want done. Maybe it's somebody who works for you, and you've tried to get them to behave in a certain way, and it just isn't working the way you want. Is there a different way to say that? And I think the key in my mind is this idea of, I like to use the metaphor of splitting a large diamond that comes into a jeweler's office. You've got this great diamond, it's magnificent, it's worth a fortune, but it's even worth more if the jeweler can split it in ways that create all kinds of beautiful gems out of this one large diamond. So you maximize your profitability, you maximize the beauty, you maximize how many people will enjoy the beauty of this one diamond by making it into multiple gems. I like to think of the work that I do as trying to find the right way to strike a person so that the thing that they've been doing is no longer the case where they're insulting or judging or harming or making problems for another person when they want to be helpful, when they want to be constructive, when they want to give feedback that's going to help the person be better. Instead, they don't know how to do it correctly and they make it worse, and so they don't do it at all after a few times trying it and being unsuccessful. But what if I can teach you how to strike it right? Striking it right means finding what's going to be important for the person to hear and understand about what you're saying to them. How do you want them to feel as you communicate with them? And how do you create those feelings, those positive feelings that makes them feel supported as opposed to attacked? How do you do it? So if you want to call in, the number to call is 402. Pick the phone up. You know, you got something on your mind, pick the phone up. Dial the number with me, 402-225-0781. That's what it looks like to me. So I hope that's the right number. You can see it on the board above me. Let's see. I can't really tell. 0781. And then when you dial that, then the PIN, because it'll ask you for a PIN, is 882-041-574 on the pound sign. So if you're out there and you think that you have something that you would like some help with, and you want to be a good citizen in the sense that, hey, if I am willing to call and I have Chuck's help with this, maybe a few other people get to see how this works. And not only will I be helped, but lots of people are learning. That's the goal for the show. So again, 402 is the number, 225-0781. You can see it on the screen above me. And then the PIN is 882-041-574 on the pound sign. So I'll encourage anybody that wants to call the number above, and anytime, just feel like you can interrupt me, because I love to have somebody call. It's really fun for me to talk with you, and so I enjoy helping people and making a difference in your life. And if I can make a positive difference for you, hopefully it's interesting to everybody that's listening. Okay. Now, as far as the rest of the show, I do want to talk about the ways that people can actually manage their emotions differently. As I said in the beginning of the show, emotions matter, right? Emotions matter. Everybody, I think, gets that, at least to a degree. But what most people don't understand is that you can manage your emotions much better than you actually ever realize for most people, and that you can also influence the emotions of others with some key strategies. So here are a few strategies I'd like to share with you. The first one is, can I change my feelings? Can I actually change what I'm feeling? Now, how do you do that? It is what it is. It's what people will say. If I'm feeling sad, I'm just sad. That's the deal. If I'm sad because my pet is sick, my son just heard some unfortunate news about his company, if I'm sad, there may be lots of reasons to be sad. But what if the sadness has gone on too long? Or what if the sadness is no longer helpful? What if I want to change the sadness? Is there a way to do that? There's several. One is, what makes me feel happy? I mean, just answer the question for yourself. What makes you happy? Happiness for me, as an example, is being with family members, being with my wife out for lunch like we went today. Happy times. Seeing someone that I like and I care about and having a nice conversation. The restaurant owner, where we went to eat, the restaurant owner. Just having a chance to ask, how are you and how are your children? We've had a relationship with this restaurant owner for many years. And she stopped and talked to us, and we haven't talked to her in a while, and we learned a lot about her children and how well they're doing and how nice that was. So having conversations with people we like and we care about. being with my grandkids, playing catch with my grandsons, making my granddaughter smile, doing something something artistic with her, talking with her about the things that she cares about, being with the woods, with the trees and the animals and all of nature, just being outside and walking through the forest, communing with nature, watching something funny on TV, watching a movie. I was talking with my daughter today, and it's a movie I saw a long time ago. That was really interesting. I think I'm going to watch again tonight because it's kind of what makes me feel happy, and thinking about things that are really things that actually will change my behavior, and changing my behavior, because my behavior when I'm sad is I kind of sit back, I kind of think about things, I'm not very active. I'm sort of passive, and if I want to be happy, I need to do more. Take more focus in my life and do some things that I know are going to be fun, and change that feeling of sadness to something happy. Doesn't mean the sadness goes away. If something is going on and somebody's dealing with sickness or illness of some type, it doesn't go away. There's still a part of me that's feeling that, but it's not dwelling there. It's not where I'm living my life. I recognize it's part of me, but it isn't all of me, and it isn't all consuming. So one thing is actually changing the feeling. Another is to change the narrative. Well, let me give you an example of that. So I hope to be doing some work in the field of, this is great. I want to use my emotion roadmap to help people with progressive diseases who are struggling. Progressive diseases, if you don't know what the term means, is something where people who feel ill and have a disease that doesn't go away, it progressively gets worse. Things like dementia, Parkinson's, essential tremor. It happens to be the one that we're focused on. A lot of people don't know what that is, but it's a movement disorder. And I'm working with a wonderful Yale faculty member, Joan Monin, who specializes in helping people in this world and researching all the things that will be beneficial to people who struggle with progressive illnesses. Her real specialty is dementia, but she's working with me on essential tremor, and we're working in this organization in Connecticut with a wonderful woman, Helen Moser, who is running a support group for people with essential tremor. And we've been going to that because this is something that is in our family, and so we go to this meetings. But we're working on this idea of trying to find ways to help people deal with the emotional side of knowing you have a progressive disease for the person with the disease and for the person who is a primary caregiver. Might be a spouse, might be a parent for a child, might be a child for a parent, might be a friend of the family, might be a sibling, could be anybody. But the goal is to try and teach people this emotion roadmap that I'm talking to you about tonight to help them to cope more successfully. I was asked to write a paper for this group, the Essential Tremor Group, and one of the things that I realized is that if your life is changing and you find out you have a progressive disease and you're somewhat far along, and your life of travel and leisure and pleasure is all of a sudden totally upset, and your years that you're going to be doing things that you thought you would enjoy and had plenty of time for are cut back significantly, and you may not be able to do them at all, obviously the emotions you feel are challenging, upsetting, depressing, so forth. So what do you want to feel instead? That's the idea of a roadmap. The roadmap says, if what I'm feeling isn't helpful, and I want to feel something better, more ideal to feel, what could I feel? So I think for a caretaker with someone that they love deeply, and they're their partner or their friend or their spouse or their whatever relationship you have, I think what you want to feel is radical compassion, incredibly supportive, loving behavior towards that individual. And feel the joy in being able to be caring for somebody in your life that is a part of your life that you just absolutely adore, and are thrilled that you are the person that can provide the care with them. And every moment you're together is something that you welcome and you are extremely grateful and thankful for. Now that's a lot different than feeling like, oh God, you need something else from me? Man, I wish we could have taken that trip. I wish we did this before this all started to happen. Man, I am so upset about life changes in a way that I wasn't expecting, we weren't expecting. All our plans are out the way. And boy, can't you see going down that road as being a really unhappy road to go down? And yet, isn't that an initial reaction you might have? Isn't that real? And should you pretend that you don't have any of those feelings? Because I say pretend because I think everybody has some of that. So how do you change that up? Well, it's not going to go away, but what if you change the narrative? What if you change what you say to yourself about it? So one of these people I'm going to be doing this work with, teaching people who have this disease and their caretakers how to use the roadmap to help with this, is the idea of trying to be there for the person and help them to understand that you can change how you feel. So I'm talking to this woman today. Her name is Helen. And she's saying, look, sometimes essential tremor, by the way, causes you to shake. You might shake your hands, you might shake your head, it might shake your whole body might have a tremor. And I'm not an expert in the disease, but I am an expert in the emotional side of things. And so I'm trying to be helpful around this. And I said, I was listening to her talk, and she said, if I'm giving a speech, and she's a very active, very successful, and competent woman, and she's doesn't have anybody caring for her, doesn't need that, but she does have the disease. And she said, sometimes I'm up giving a speech, and I'll be giving the speech, and my hand will start to shake, and I'll see somebody in the audience kind of staring at me and definitely looking a bit uncomfortable. And I'll use this as an opportunity to explain that, explain to essential tremor as a disease, and this is something that I have. It's something I live with, but I just want you all to understand that this is normal for me. It's fine. And use it as an opportunity to educate the audience about what's going on. And now all of a sudden, all those people that were a little uncomfortable looking at the person shaking are, oh, okay, I get it. She's comfortable with it, so I guess I am too. That's the way you're influencing how other people feel at the same time you're controlling how you feel about it. What's the other possibility? That she's embarrassed, that she feels uncomfortable, that she's worried that other people are going to say, oh my God, she's shaking, I can't even hear what she's saying anymore. I'm so focused on the shaking. But I said, that's beautiful, because that's exactly what I'm trying to help people to do. Learn how to live with your circumstances in a way that you adjust how you feel emotionally through emotion-based planning. Now, this just came intuitively to her, but I said, that's what I want to teach people how to do. I want you to understand that you can change how you feel, in part by changing the feelings. Do something that's going to cause you to feel differently. Cause the feelings to change. In therapy, years ago I was a therapist, and there's a lot of different models of therapy out there. Some is this idea, like Rogerian style of therapy, is where you reflect back to people what they're feeling, and you help them to find their own answers by repeating back to them or helping them. Oftentimes, a Rogerian therapist will listen to somebody talk quite a long time, maybe 30, 40 minutes, about what's going on with them. And in 3 to 5 minutes, say back to them what they've heard. And the person will say, yeah, that's what I'm feeling. So help them by sort of acting as a sounding board and help them to clarify, giving them emotional clarity about what they're experiencing. Okay, that's what you're feeling. How might you want to feel different about that? What might you do? And it allows people to then talk about ways that they can change how they feel. That's sort of Rogerian, called non-directive. You don't tell people. They find ways for themselves by you reflecting back to them. And then they'll give you all kinds of things and say, well, of all the things that you said, is there something that might be really something you would want to do that is likely to work, that has a good chance of working? Because you've said, and then repeat back to them the 4 or 5 different ideas they have about this. They said, yeah, well, actually, most of them wouldn't work, but this might. And they'll tell you the one that they think might have some success. And then it's their plan. It's not your plan. That's the idea of non-directive. Very directive therapy. I was trained in the model. Albert Ellis was rational emotive behavior. He said, okay, if this is how you're feeling, this is how you want to feel, this is what you need to do. Here's your homework. Go home, read this book, watch this documentary. Go outside, get some fresh air. Make sure you walk twice a day. Walk 2 miles, a mile in the morning, a mile in the afternoon. Go out, do things. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Get out, act. Start reading. Here's some books I think you'd benefit from, and just very directive about how you might change. By the way, one or both of those theories might work for you or somebody you know. And I always found that the idea of finding stuck in one theory was problematic for me. I tried to learn a lot from a lot of different people, so that my therapy was kind of geared towards who are you and what matters to you and what might work with you. So those were some of the ideas that hopefully give you some ways of thinking about how you might change feelings. Behaviorally, be directive with yourself, give yourself the homework, or be reflective with yourself. Okay, so this is how I'm feeling. What do I want to feel? And how can I make happen what I want to have happen so I feel the way I want to feel? For me and for others. How do I do that? So one is you change your behaviors. Two is you try to change the narrative of what you say to yourself. And the third is you compartmentalize what it is you're feeling and change the feeling, and you remove the feeling by putting it in a black box. I like to think, you know how we have firewalls on the computers or on our phones even, where we try to protect against malicious content, against viruses. People, there's a lot of really nasty folks out there that want to be harmful to you in ways that invade your computer or your phone. And so you want to protect yourself, and one of the ways you do that is through technology. Well, what if we have, human technology is the idea of trying to create what I consider to be an emotional firewall? What if there are certain behaviors that I can't change, that I want to change? For years I've wanted to change a few behaviors that have been problematic for me that I know are not helpful to me or anybody around me. And yet I've had difficulty. I can admit that I've had problems trying to change certain behaviors. One of which I don't mind sharing with you is like eating at night. Now, imagine I'm not alone in this. Maybe for somebody else is taking drugs or drinking too much or even over-exercising or working too much, not being at home. Lots of things can be problematic that in moderation might not be a problem. But in any case, what I found was I couldn't change my behavior. I'm a smart guy, but when I have an argument with myself against changing my behavior, and I want to say, well, okay, on most nights I'm not going to eat late at night, but this night's different. We didn't get home till late, or I'm celebrating a victory, or I'm out with friends, or whatever it might be. I can find a reason to go against what I've said is a behavior I want to change, no matter what. I can win any argument with myself and lose the battle. So what I've decided is that this emotional firewall idea, this concept is that I will just not do it. As soon as I start to argue with myself, I shut myself off. No conversations. It is this time of night. I've said this is the time I stop. It's over. I'll still continue to have something to drink, perhaps, something to, some kind of drink, but that's it. Nothing passes my lips in the way of food after a certain time of night. Ever. Just done. It's been going on for a year now. It works. So sometimes, again, there are three things I think are really critical for helping you change how you feel. One is, I think you should learn about this idea of how do you influence the chemical reaction in your body, so that your brain center. That's helpful. And again, I encourage you to, if you didn't hear me before, look up Monica Guzman, Braver Angels, and her interview with a neuroscientist from Germany who does work with Stanford University. It's fascinating about this idea about how do you raise your oxytocin, how do you raise your serotonin, how do you raise your dopamine levels, and there's ways to do that you can do that are helpful for changing feelings when you're stuck in things like anxiety or depression, things like that. Second, the things that I've talked to you about are kind of cognitive strategies that, one, first, can I change my feeling through my behaviors? Second, can I change the narrative around how I feel? Just say different things to myself about, okay, I understand why I'm feeling that way, but I like triggers. The idea of trigger is something that reflexively in your conversations with a spouse or somebody at work, you just know that if she says that or he says that, you're going to say this, and then he or she is going to say that, and then by the end of it, you're all going to be upset with one another. And it just starts and it doesn't stop until it's over. And then you do it again another day, a day or two later. What if you got tired of all that? What if you just said, old friend, I know you, old friend. The trigger is in my head. I get it, but we're not playing We're not playing today, and we're not playing anymore. We're done. So I know you've been in there a long time, and we've had this routine, but this routine is over. We're moving on. We're being better. We're being smarter. We're being more emotionally intelligent, and we're letting go. See you, old friend. and just let it slide. Don't engage. So there's ways to do it that way. And then finally, this idea of an emotional firewall. If you can compartmentalize something that you want to change, and you are struggling with that, make a decision, make it firm, and as soon as your brain starts to tell you why it's okay to take that drink, take that drug, eat that food, that you shouldn't eat, or whatever it is that you're doing. Maybe it's, even staying at work can be a problem, right? You say you care about your family is most important to you, and yet you're working 10, 12 hours a day, and you don't really have to. I know you want to argue with yourself about that, but you don't really have to. So I hope that gives you some ideas about ways that you can be smarter about how you can manage your emotions. This is Chuck Wolf you've been listening to. This is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I hope you enjoyed the show today. And I'm on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. on this station that you're listening to on the Simsbury Media, or on my station, CJ Wolf 5 on YouTube. CJWOLFE 5 on YouTube. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you again on a Tuesday, 5 p.m. Bye-bye.